The signature on that document felt like signing my own death warrant. My sister Emma sat across from me in our company's conference room at 11:47 p.m. Her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the mahogany table while I stared at the papers that would transfer my 45% stake in Morrison Industries directly to her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting harsh shadows across her face that made her look like a stranger. She'd called me 3 hours earlier, her voice breaking through the phone with panic I'd never heard before. The company was hemorrhaging money. Creditors were circling. Without immediate action, everything our father built would crumble by morning. She needed my shares to secure the emergency financing that would save us all. The pen trembled in my hand as I signed. Emma's relief was almost palpable, but something cold settled in my stomach, something that tasted like betrayal. I should have listened to that feeling. The elevator ride to my apartment felt like descending into a tomb. My reflection in the polished steel doors showed a man who'd just given away everything. 45% of a multi-million-dollar company handed over because my sister said, "Trust me," because family comes first. Because saving the business Dad spent 30 years building mattered more than my own financial security. My apartment felt different when I walked through the door. Emptier somehow, even though nothing had changed. The same furniture, the same pictures on the walls, the same view of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, but I wasn't the same person who'd left that morning. I was a fool who'd been played by the one person I trusted most. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of our conversation, every expression on Emma's face. The urgency in her voice had seemed so real. The fear in her eyes when she talked about losing everything. But now, in the darkness of my bedroom, details began shifting like puzzle pieces finding their proper places. How had she prepared those documents so quickly? Legal paperwork that detailed doesn't get drafted in an afternoon. The lawyer she'd brought was someone I'd never met, someone who seemed far too comfortable for a crisis meeting. And Emma herself, beneath the panic and pleading, had there been something else? A careful control, like an actress hitting her marks? At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, our head of accounting. Strange time for a message from anyone, but Marcus was notorious for working late. The message was simple: check your email when you get a chance. Found something weird in the quarterly projections. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Marcus wouldn't text me at 2 in the morning about routine projections. The cold feeling in my stomach spread upward, wrapping around my chest like ice water. My laptop screen glowed harsh blue in the darkness as I opened Marcus's email. What I found there made my hands shake so violently I nearly dropped the computer. The quarterly projections showed Morrison Industries wasn't failing. We weren't hemorrhaging money. In fact, we were sitting on the most profitable quarter in company history. The emergency that had driven me to sign over my shares didn't exist. It had never existed. But there was more. Much more. Emma had been preparing for this moment for months. The email trail Marcus had uncovered showed a pattern of careful manipulation. She'd been moving money between accounts, creating the illusion of financial distress. She'd been meeting with investors, promising them controlling interest in the company once she consolidated ownership. She'd been planning to push me out entirely. The room spun around me as the full scope of her betrayal unfolded. This wasn't a desperate attempt to save the family business. This was a calculated coup, years in the making. My own sister had been plotting to steal everything from me. I called Marcus immediately. His voice was thick with exhaustion, but alert. "I knew something was wrong when I saw those transfer documents," he said. "The timing didn't make sense, so I dug deeper." "How deep?" "Deep enough to know Emma's been planning this since she came back from business school. She's got financing lined up to buy out the remaining shareholders. With your 45% added to her 35, she'll have 80% control. Everyone else becomes irrelevant. Including me. Especially you." The call ended and I sat alone with the weight of total betrayal. My sister, the person I'd protected since childhood, had been my enemy all along. Every family dinner, every business meeting, every moment of supposed trust had been theater. She'd been studying me, learning my weaknesses, preparing for this exact moment. But Marcus's email had included something else, something Emma didn't know he'd discovered. The remaining 20% of company shares weren't distributed evenly among small investors like we'd always believed. Through a complex trust our father had established before his death, those shares were available for purchase by existing family shareholders. Emma, in her careful planning, had missed this crucial detail. She thought she was buying control, but she was actually creating an opportunity. An opportunity for me to buy back everything she'd stolen and more. I spent the remaining hours until dawn crafting my response. Not an emotional confrontation that would give Emma time to adjust her strategy. Not a legal challenge that would drag through courts for years. Something cleaner. Something that would use her own manipulation against her. By 6 a.m., I'd contacted my own lawyer. Someone Emma had never met. Someone she couldn't charm or threaten or buy. Within hours, the paperwork would be ready for my countermove. The beautiful thing about revenge is its perfect symmetry. Emma called me at 9 that morning, her voice bright with false concern. "How are you holding up? I know last night was difficult, but you did the right thing. Dad would be proud." The mention of our father sent rage coursing through me like liquid fire. Using his memory to justify her betrayal was beyond forgiveness. "I'm fine," I managed. "Actually, I'm better than fine. I've been thinking about the future of the company." "That's wonderful. I have some exciting plans I'd love to share with you. Maybe we could have dinner tonight?" "Actually, Emma, I think you're going to be too busy tonight." "Busy with what?" "Reading the paperwork my lawyer will be delivering this afternoon." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to hear her breathing change. When she spoke again, the warmth had evaporated from her voice. "What paperwork?" "The kind that explains how sometimes the person you think you're destroying has been 3 steps ahead of you all along." I hung up before she could respond. The next 6 hours moved like a carefully orchestrated symphony. My lawyer delivered the documents to Emma's office at exactly 1 p.m. By 3 p.m., my phone was ringing constantly with her increasingly frantic calls, all of which I ignored. By 5 p.m., the emergency board meeting she'd called was underway, with me sitting at the head of the conference table instead of her. The same conference room where she'd stolen my shares now hosted her destruction. The board members filed in looking confused and concerned. Emma entered last, her face pale but her posture still defiant. She'd always been beautiful, but betrayal had stripped away something essential, leaving her looking hollow and desperate. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady and cold. "Thank you for attending on short notice. I'm sure you're all wondering why we're here." Emma tried to interrupt. "This meeting is irregular. I called it to discuss important business matters." "You're right, Emma. We are discussing important business matters. Specifically, we're discussing your attempted theft of this company and my response to it." The room fell silent. Board members shifted uncomfortably, sensing the undercurrent of family warfare, but not yet understanding its scope. I opened the folder in front of me and began laying out the evidence. Marcus's financial projections showing the company's actual health. The email trails demonstrating Emma's manipulation. The fake crisis she'd manufactured to pressure me into signing over my shares. With each revelation, Emma's composure crumbled a little more. By the time I reached the core of her deception, she was gripping the edge of the table like a lifeline. "But here's the thing about elaborate schemes," I continued, looking directly at my sister. "They require perfect information. And Emma, you didn't have perfect information." I slid the final documents across the table. The ones showing my acquisition of the 20% trust shares Emma hadn't known existed. The ones that gave me 55% control of Morrison Industries as of that afternoon. "Your plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Trick me into giving you my 45%, add it to your 35%, and suddenly you control 80% of the company. Push out the remaining small shareholders and you own everything. Everything Dad built becomes yours alone." Emma's face had gone completely white. "You don't understand. I was trying to save us both. The company needed protection from you." The words landed like physical blows. Emma flinched, then seemed to collapse inward. For a moment, she looked like the little sister I'd once protected from playground bullies. But that person was gone, replaced by someone who'd betrayed everything we'd once meant to each other. "I'm sure you're all wondering what this means going forward." I addressed the board. "It means Morrison Industries will continue under stable leadership. Emma will retain her original 35% stake, of course. Family is family. but her decision-making authority ends today. One of the board members cleared his throat. And the shares you signed over last night? Will be returned to me by close of business tomorrow. Contracts signed under false pretenses have no legal standing. Emma's lawyer, I suspect, is about to have a very difficult conversation with her about legal liability. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor like fingernails on glass. This isn't over. Yes, Emma, it is. She gathered her papers with shaking hands and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, she turned back to look at me. In her eyes, I saw a mixture of rage, defeat, and something that might have been respect or hatred. With Emma, the two had always been closely related. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for, she said quietly. No, Emma. I was exactly as smart as you knew I was. That was your first mistake. The door closed behind her with finality. The board meeting continued for another hour, covering the practical details of transitional leadership and corporate restructuring. But my mind was elsewhere, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. In 24 hours, I'd lost everything and gained it back with interest. I'd discovered my sister's true nature and responded in kind. I'd learned that family loyalty, when betrayed, can transform into something harder and more dangerous than any business rival. When the meeting finally ended and the board members filed out, I sat alone in the conference room where this had all begun. The same harsh lighting, the same mahogany table, the same city view through tall windows, but everything was different now. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Emergency board meeting went well, I take it? I typed back. Better than expected. Emma? Still my sister. Still a 35% shareholder. Still not someone I'll ever trust again. Fair enough. Drinks to celebrate? I considered it. Celebrating felt premature somehow. What I'd accomplished wasn't victory so much as survival. I'd prevented my own destruction, but at the cost of any relationship with the only family I had left. Rain check. I need to process this. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt different from the previous night's descent. Instead of defeat, I carried a strange mixture of satisfaction and loss. I'd won, but winning had required becoming someone I wasn't sure I recognized. Someone capable of elaborate counter-deception. Someone who could look his sister in the eye and systematically destroy her plans with clinical precision. Maybe that person had always existed inside me, waiting for the right betrayal to bring him to the surface. My apartment felt different too when I returned that evening. Not empty anymore, but charged with potential energy. The same furniture, the same view, but inhabited now by someone who understood the true nature of power. Someone who'd learned that family could be both your greatest strength and your most dangerous weakness. I poured myself a scotch and stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably planning her next move. Regrouping, reassessing, preparing for whatever came next. She wouldn't give up easily. Neither of us had ever been the type to accept defeat gracefully. But for tonight, I had control. For tonight, the company was safe from her schemes. For tonight, I could allow myself to feel the satisfaction of a game well played. My phone rang at exactly midnight. Emma's number appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let her wonder, let her stew in uncertainty about what I might do next, but curiosity won out. Hello, Emma. You knew, didn't you? Even before you signed those papers, you suspected something. Her voice was different now, no pretense, no manipulation, just exhausted honesty. I felt something was wrong. But no, I didn't know. I trusted you right up until Marcus sent me that email. I almost had you convinced Marcus was wrong. When you called this morning, I thought maybe I could still salvage this. You thought you could manipulate me again, you mean? A long pause. Then, yes. The admission hung between us like a physical presence. No denials, no justifications, just the truth we'd both been dancing around. Why, Emma? Why go through all of this when we could have built something together? Because together meant compromising. Together meant sharing control with someone who didn't want it as badly as I did. You were always content to be Dad's son. I wanted to be Dad himself. And now? Now I understand why Dad set up that trust the way he did. He knew one of us would eventually try to destroy the other. He just wanted to make sure the company survived our war. The conversation felt like a funeral for our relationship. We were mourning something that might never have existed in the first place, but had sustained us both through years of believing we were on the same side. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we're business partners who happen to share DNA, nothing more, nothing less. Can you live with that?" I looked out at the city lights, thousands of people living their own complicated stories in the darkness. "Can you?" "I'll have to." The line went dead. I set the phone aside and finished my scotch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to either build or destroy. Emma would still be there, still brilliant and dangerous and unpredictable. She'd still own 35% of everything I cared about. We'd still have to find ways to coexist in board meetings and family gatherings and the strange liminal space between love and warfare. But tonight, I'd won. Tonight, I'd proven that betrayal was a game two people could play, and that sometimes the person who looks most vulnerable is actually the one with the strongest hand. The city hummed with life outside my windows. Somewhere in that vast expanse of light and shadow, Emma was probably making her own calculations, planning her own next moves. The war between us wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase, one where we both understood the rules and the stakes. I raised my empty glass in a toast to the darkness, to family, to betrayal, to the strange satisfaction that comes from discovering you're stronger than anyone believed, including yourself. The glass caught the light from the city and reflected it back like a prism, breaking white light into a spectrum of colors, beautiful and fractured, like everything that mattered most. Just like us.